Welcome back to the Bitcoin Zodiac, where we explore Bitcoin through the lens of financial astrology and focus on generational cycles over short-term noise. The second half of August carries a very different energy from the first. The month begins with visibility, confidence, and a strong desire to move forward. By mid-August, that confidence begins to encounter pressure. Some ideas will prove ready, others will reveal where enthusiasm has moved faster than structure. The eclipses frame this period with a sense of inevitability. They tend to accelerate developments that have already been forming beneath the surface. What feels sudden may have been building for months. What looks like disruption may actually be the moment when an older pattern can no longer continue. For Bitcoin, this is an important phase. The astrology speaks to visibility, regulation, institutional pressure, changing public perception, and a deeper restructuring of power. There are supportive transits throughout the period, but there are also serious tests. Confidence may expand, narratives may intensify, pressure may expose weaknesses that can no longer be ignored. The larger story is still one of evolution, but August reminds us that maturation requires friction. Let's begin with the solar eclipse in Leo. On August 12th, we have a solar eclipse at 20 degrees and 1 minute of Leo. Solar eclipses open new chapters. They can bring beginnings that feel larger than the moment itself, although their meaning often unfolds gradually over the months that follow. Leo asks us to consider visibility, leadership, creativity, confidence, and the way we express our identity. This eclipse may bring a strong desire to step forward. You may feel called to share something more openly, claim a role you have hesitated to occupy, or take responsibility for a vision that has been growing quietly in the background. Leo energy wants expression. It wants courage. It wants us to participate in our own lives instead of waiting for permission. Yet this eclipse occurs while the South Node is moving through Leo. That changes the tone. The invitation is not simply to become more visible. It is to release the forms of visibility that depend on applause, status, or recognition. Something about identity may need to be simplified. A role may have become too performative. A goal may have become too closely tied to validation. This eclipse can help reveal where confidence is authentic and where it has become dependent on external approval. In financial markets, Leo amplifies visibility, leadership, spectacle, and narrative. This can be a period when major personalities, corporations, governments, or institutions take stronger public positions. For Bitcoin, the eclipse may coincide with a new phase of visibility. A public announcement, policy shift, institutional decision, or cultural development could bring Bitcoin into a larger conversation. However, eclipses are rarely easy to interpret in real time. What initially looks bullish may contain hidden pressure. What appears negative may clear the path for future growth. For traders, this is a period where patience matters. Avoid assuming that the first market reaction reveals the final direction. For long-term investors, the eclipse invites a broader question. Is Bitcoin's future dependent on charismatic advocates, or is the network becoming strong enough to speak through its own utility? That question matters deeply as the South Node continues moving through Leo and collective trust gradually shifts away from personalities towards systems. Also on August 12th, transiting Jupiter forms a semi-square to Bitcoin's natal midheaven. The midheaven represents public reputation, visibility, social standing, and long-term direction. Jupiter expands whatever it touches. The semi-square introduces friction. This can increase Bitcoin's public profile while also creating pressure around how it is perceived. Greater attention often brings greater scrutiny. As Bitcoin becomes more visible, more institutions may feel compelled to define their position. Governments may clarify policy. Regulators may intensify discussion. Media narratives may grow louder. Corporate leaders may take more public stances. This transit can support growth in recognition, but it may also reveal tension between Bitcoin's emerging status and the institutions trying to interpret, regulate, or absorb it. For traders, this can create headline-driven volatility. For investors, it is useful to remember that reputation often becomes more contested when an asset moves closer to mainstream significance. The friction may reflect expansion rather than rejection. On August 15th, Mercury conjoins Jupiter. This is an expansive meeting of the mind and the planet of growth. Mercury governs communication, information, learning, trade, data, and analysis. Jupiter enlarges the conversation. Ideas become bigger. Announcements can travel further. Confidence in a particular narrative may increase quickly. Personally, this can be a powerful day for seeing a larger pattern. You may understand how several disconnected events belong to the same story. A conversation could open a new direction. Research may reveal something that changes your perspective. The challenge is excess. Mercury with Jupiter can overstate. People may speak with greater certainty than the facts support. Optimism can become persuasive because it is expressed convincingly. In financial markets, this aspect can amplify news, projections, forecasts, and public enthusiasm. For Bitcoin, it may coincide with a major announcement, increased media interest, educational expansion, or a more confident institutional narrative. This can be constructive for adoption. It can also encourage investors to accept bullish claims too quickly. For traders, watch how price reacts after the initial excitement. A strong headline does not always produce sustained follow-through. For long-term investors, this transit supports learning, research, and a wider understanding of Bitcoin's role in the financial system. On August 16th, transiting Chiron forms a quincunx to Bitcoin's natal Pluto. Pluto in Bitcoin's chart speaks to power, survival, transformation, hidden pressure, and the network's relationship with crisis. Chiron reveals wounds that can become sources of wisdom. The quincunx creates discomfort that cannot be solved through force. It requires adjustment. This transit may expose a subtle vulnerability within Bitcoin's evolving relationship with power. Questions around regulation, mining, custody, privacy, governance, or institutional control could become more difficult to ignore. The issue may not be dramatic at first. Quincunxes often begin as a sense that something does not fit properly. A system may still function, yet the underlying arrangement feels increasingly unsustainable. For Bitcoin, this could reflect tension between the network's decentralized design and the growing influence of large institutions. It may also raise questions about who controls access, infrastructure, liquidity, or public narrative. For investors, this transit encourages discernment. The existence of institutional adoption does not remove the need to understand concentration risk. For traders, subtle changes in sentiment may matter more than the headline itself.
I'm briefly interrupting this episode to speak to you about one of my best-kept secrets, Shortlist. If you love luxury travel but hate the endless hours it takes to plan it, you need to know about Shortlist. Think of it as your premier membership for the uncompromising traveler. Shortlist gives you access to a beautifully curated world of exceptional hotels, villas, and experiences, with insider recommendations and reservations, and also exclusive member benefits designed to make every trip feel effortless. Less searching, better choices, extraordinary travel. If you're particular about where you stay and how you travel, Shortlist belongs on your radar. Click on the link in the description box to discover Shortlist. Okay, let's get back to the show.
On August 17th, Mars in Cancer squares retrograde Neptune in Aries. This is one of the more confusing transits of the month. Mars wants action. Neptune dissolves certainty. When these planets form a square, energy can become scattered. Motivation may rise, but direction may remain unclear. People may react emotionally before fully understanding what is happening. In personal life, this transit can create frustration, fatigue, idealized action, or a desire to defend something without knowing whether the threat is real. Cancer adds emotional sensitivity. Aries adds urgency. Together they can make instinct feel louder than judgment. Financially, Mars square Neptune can create unreliable momentum. Rumors may move markets. Fear can become exaggerated. Traders may chase moves that lack structure. Liquidity can thin around uncertainty. This is not a favorable aspect for impulsive decision-making. For Bitcoin, the transit may coincide with confusing narratives, false signals, conflicting reports, or price action that appears decisive but lacks confirmation. For active traders, this is a day to reduce assumptions. Wait for cleaner structure. Be careful with leverage. For investors, avoid making major changes based solely on emotional headlines. Also on August 17th, Venus in Libra forms a sextile to Jupiter in Leo. This is a softer influence and offers some balance to the Mars-Neptune tension. Venus governs value, relationships, attraction, and harmony. Jupiter expands confidence and opportunity. The sextile can support cooperation, diplomacy, agreements, and improved sentiment. Personally, this may bring a moment of ease. Support can arrive through relationships. A conversation may become more constructive. Something that felt difficult may become easier to negotiate. In financial markets, Venus and Jupiter often support optimism, liquidity, appetite for risk, and positive social mood. For Bitcoin, this can attract interest from investors, institutions, or partners who see growing value in participation. It may support new collaborations, financial products, or broader integration. However, because Mars is simultaneously squaring Neptune, the positive mood should still be approached carefully. Confidence may improve while clarity remains incomplete. For traders, sentiment may be constructive but unstable. For investors, this transit may support longer-term relationship building between Bitcoin and traditional finance. Also on August 17th, transiting Saturn squares Bitcoin's natal Pluto. This is one of the most serious and consequential transits of the period. Saturn represents limits, regulation, authority, responsibility, pressure, and structure. Pluto represents power, transformation, survival, and control. The square brings these forces into direct tension. For Bitcoin, this can symbolize institutional pressure. Regulatory restrictions may intensify. Governments or financial authorities may attempt to define, contain, control, or reshape the conditions under which Bitcoin operates. This transit may also expose structural weaknesses. Infrastructure, custody systems, exchanges, miners, or financial intermediaries could face greater demands. Saturn square Pluto rarely allows weak structures to remain hidden. It tests durability. The pressure can feel restrictive, but it may also force necessary reform. Bitcoin itself has survived repeated attempts to limit, ban, or discredit it. This transit may once again ask the network to demonstrate resilience. For traders, this can coincide with heightened volatility, fear, or sharp reactions to regulatory developments. For investors, the key question is whether the pressure threatens the network itself or mainly affects the systems built around it. There is a meaningful difference between Bitcoin and the institutions that provide access to Bitcoin. Saturn square Pluto may make that distinction impossible to ignore. On the same day, transiting Jupiter forms a sextile to Bitcoin's natal moon. The moon in Bitcoin's chart reflects collective sentiment, emotional response, public confidence, and instinctive market behavior. Jupiter brings growth and optimism. The sextile opens opportunity. This can support a recovery in sentiment even while Saturn square Pluto creates pressure. Public interest may increase. Institutional confidence may remain stronger than expected. A difficult event could be interpreted as part of a larger maturation process rather than a fatal threat. This aspect may help Bitcoin absorb some of the intensity surrounding the other August 17th transits. It can also create an emotional split. The market may feel hopeful and fearful at the same time. That combination can produce large swings. For traders, it is important to distinguish sentiment from structure. For investors, this transit suggests that public belief in Bitcoin may remain resilient despite institutional pressure. On August 22nd, the Sun conjoins the South Node at 29 degrees and 49 minutes of Leo. The final degree of a sign often carries urgency. It can feel like the completion of a lesson that has been unfolding for a long time. The Sun represents identity, leadership, visibility, and purpose. The South Node represents release, familiarity, and patterns that have reached the end of their usefulness. Personally, this can bring a moment of recognition. A role may no longer fit. A desire for approval may feel exhausting. You may see where you have been performing strength rather than living from genuine confidence. This transit asks us to release an older identity so that something more honest can emerge. In financial markets, the Sun conjunct the South Node can expose the limitations of personality-driven leadership. Public figures may lose influence. Narratives built around charisma may weaken. A celebrated project, company, or leader may reveal vulnerability. For Bitcoin, this is especially relevant. Bitcoin has no central leader. Its strength does not depend on one personality. As the South Node moves through Leo, that absence may become increasingly important. The market may begin distinguishing between networks built around personalities and systems built around verifiable rules. For investors, this transit reinforces the value of separating Bitcoin from the people who speak on its behalf.
I'm pausing this episode for just a moment to share one of our partners, the Sculpt Society. If you want workouts that actually fit into your life, you need to know about the Sculpt Society. Created by celebrity trainer Megan Roop, the Sculpt Society brings effective, feel-good workouts straight to you, wherever you are. Think sculpt, strength, dance cardio, and low-impact movement with classes for different fitness levels and schedules. Whether you have 10 minutes or you want a full workout, you can simply press play and move. It's convenient, energizing, and designed to make consistency feel so much easier. Click on the link in the description box to join the Sculpt Society and start your 7-day free trial today. Let's get back to the episode.
On August 25th, Mercury conjoins the South Node at 29 degrees and 50 minutes of Leo. Mercury governs communication, information, thought, trade, and interpretation. The South Node returns us to familiar ideas. Old narratives may reappear. Past arguments may repeat. A conversation thought to be finished may return for resolution. Personally, this can be a useful day for recognizing where your thinking has become repetitive. You may notice that you are trying to solve a current problem with an outdated story. In financial markets, Mercury conjunct the South Node can revive old fears, previous forecasts, or familiar media narratives. For Bitcoin, this may bring renewed discussion of regulation, energy use, volatility, or legitimacy. The content may feel familiar because the market has heard it before. The important question is whether the underlying reality has changed. For traders, old narratives can still move price even when they contain little new information. For investors, this is a reminder to separate repetition from relevance. Later on August 25th, Mercury enters Virgo. Mercury is at home here. The mind becomes more precise. Attention moves toward detail, evidence, systems, and practical improvement. After the emotional intensity of Leo, Virgo asks what actually works. Personally, this supports organization, research, refinement, and clearer decision-making. You may feel ready to simplify a plan, correct an error, or build a more reliable process. In financial markets, Mercury in Virgo supports data analysis, due diligence, technical review, and critical thinking. For Bitcoin, the conversation may become more practical. Questions around network security, custody, settlement, energy use, regulation, accounting, and infrastructure may receive more careful attention. This is helpful for both traders and investors. For traders, the emphasis shifts toward execution and evidence. For investors, it is a strong period for reviewing assumptions and strengthening operational security. On August 27th, Mercury reaches Cazimi at 4 degrees and 27 minutes of Virgo. Mercury enters the heart of the Sun. This can bring a moment of mental clarity. A decision may become obvious. Information may organize itself into a coherent pattern. The noise begins to separate from what matters. Because Mercury is in Virgo, the insight may be practical rather than dramatic. You may suddenly understand what needs to be fixed, simplified, measured, or removed. In financial markets, Mercury Cazimi can clarify a narrative. New information may sharpen expectations. A policy statement, data release, technical development, or institutional decision could become especially significant. For Bitcoin, this transit may support greater clarity around fundamentals. Investors may focus more closely on adoption, network strength, liquidity, regulation, or the reliability of infrastructure. For traders, this can be a useful moment for reassessing bias after the confusion of mid-August. However, the lunar eclipse arrives the same day. Clarity may appear alongside emotional intensity. The period concludes on August 27th with a lunar eclipse at 4 degrees and 53 minutes of Pisces. Lunar eclipses bring culmination, revelation, and emotional release. Pisces dissolves boundaries. It draws attention toward intuition, belief, surrender, confusion, and collective feeling. This eclipse may reveal where faith has become detached from reality. A dream may need to evolve. An illusion may lose its power. A chapter built on hope alone may reach its natural conclusion. Personally, this eclipse can feel emotional. You may need more space. Answers may arrive through quiet rather than force. Pisces reminds us that uncertainty is not always a problem to solve immediately. Sometimes clarity emerges only after the emotional tide recedes. In financial markets, Pisces can amplify collective imagination. Fear and hope may become difficult to separate. Narratives may feel more powerful than evidence. The eclipse could expose hidden assumptions within the market. For Bitcoin, this may reveal where belief has become excessive, where expectations have become unrealistic, or where collective fear has distorted perspective. It may also deepen Bitcoin's symbolic role. During periods of institutional uncertainty, assets can become more than financial instruments. They begin carrying emotional meaning. Bitcoin may increasingly represent independence, distrust of authority, technological hope, or protection from monetary disorder. That symbolism can support adoption. It can also create speculative excess. For traders, the eclipse period may produce unstable price action and emotionally charged reactions. For investors, this is a time to remain grounded. Return to first principles. Ask whether the long-term thesis remains intact. Avoid making permanent decisions in response to temporary emotional intensity. The second half of August brings a demanding combination of visibility, optimism, pressure, and release. The Leo solar eclipse opens a new chapter around leadership, confidence, and Bitcoin's public role. Mercury conjunct Jupiter amplifies ideas and narratives. Venus sextile Jupiter supports cooperation and improving sentiment. Jupiter sextile Bitcoin's natal moon suggests that collective confidence may remain more resilient than expected. At the same time, the month contains significant pressure. Mars square Neptune can create confusion and false momentum. Saturn square Bitcoin's natal Pluto tests the network's relationship with regulation, control, and institutional power. Chiron quincunx Bitcoin's natal Pluto exposes subtler vulnerabilities within the evolving structure. The South Node conjunctions ask the market to release outdated stories, personality-driven narratives, and familiar assumptions. The Pisces lunar eclipse closes the period by dissolving what can no longer be sustained. For active traders, this is not a period to become overconfident. The astrology suggests strong narratives, sharp emotional shifts, and potential headline volatility. Reduce assumptions. Respect confirmation. Be careful with leverage around August 17th and the eclipse window. For long-term investors, the deeper question is structural. Does institutional pressure weaken Bitcoin, or does it reveal the distinction between Bitcoin itself and the centralized systems surrounding it? That distinction may become increasingly important. The larger cycle continues, pointing toward a redistribution of trust. The North Node in Aquarius supports networks, open systems, and decentralized technology. The South Node in Leo challenges dependence on personalities, spectacle, and authority figures. The eclipses accelerate that transition. Bitcoin remains aligned with the broader movement toward verifiable systems, but alignment with the future does not remove volatility from the journey. Every new financial order is shaped through periods of tension. Old structures rarely release power willingly. New systems must prove they can endure pressure. August may test confidence, but tests are often how confidence becomes real. Astrology does not guarantee market direction. It offers a way to understand timing, collective psychology, and the forces shaping behavior. The purpose is not to predict every move. The purpose is to recognize when the market is entering a period of greater sensitivity, greater opportunity, or greater risk. Thank you for joining me for this August 2026 forecast. Let me know in the comments which transit you are watching most closely, especially Saturn's square to Bitcoin's natal Pluto and the Pisces lunar eclipse. As always, this is not financial advice. Continue your own research, protect your capital, and remember that conviction is strongest when it is supported by understanding. I'll see you in the next episode. Until then, peace, love, and Bitcoin.